She was sold as a fake wife to fool a judge. He unmasked her as the West's silver vein heiress. In the shadows of the unforgiving frontier, Celeste Munro's heart shattered with every desperate breath. Sold as a fake wife to a man she barely knew, she was shackled by the weight of a lie that suffocated her spirit. A judge's gavel echoed through the dusty courthouse, sealing her fate in a world that saw her as nothing more than a pawn. Yet behind her fragile facade lay a secret more precious than silver, an inheritance that could lift her from this cruel charade. With each fleeting glance, Celeste felt the sting of injustice clawing at her insides as she longed to reclaim her identity and rise above the deceptions woven around her. Little did they know, the heart of the West's most elusive heiress was ready to shatter the chains of her past, igniting a fire that would change her destiny forever. The dusty saloon buzzed with a mix of muffled laughter and the clinking of whiskey glasses, but her heart thudded against her ribs like a trapped bird, desperate to escape its cage. Alice perched on a rickety stool, her eyes scanning the room, every nerve on high alert. They'd paraded her like a prize horse, draped in borrowed finery, but the weight of deceit settled heavily on her shoulders. Beneath the shimmering fabric, her skin prickled. She felt exposed, scrutinized. Each patron's gaze seemed to flay her insides, revealing the tangled truth of her existence, a facade meant to distract from the shadows lurking behind her father's once glistening silver vein. Across the room, Jacob leaned against the bar, his rugged hands clutching a glass, a storm brewing in his steel-grey eyes. He caught her gaze, and for an instant the din of the saloon faded, replaced by the resonance of unspoken promises. Beneath the layers of his hard exterior, something softened, a thread of understanding that whispered he, too, had known the burden of wearing a mask. But this was no quaint love story. It was a collision of two worlds, and the stakes were higher than either of them could afford to lose. Anxiety twisted in her gut, mingling with a flicker of something she dared not acknowledge. Hope. The air crackled with tension as the judge entered, his presence casting an oppressive shadow. Alice's breath hitched, and she felt Jacob's gaze anchor her, even as her body trembled under the weight of her secret. This was the moment their lives would split on a jagged line, one side painted with the brush of salvation, the other marred with deceit. As the judge's eyes swept across the room, Alice clenched her fists, feeling the pulse of her heartbeat resonate in her ears. She could feel the tremors of fate inching closer, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed web around her. But Jacob's unyielding stare held her steady, a lifeline tethering her to reality amidst the chaos. With every intake of breath, she could almost hear the echo of her family's expectations, their dreams woven tightly around her slender neck. Yet the essence of who she was screamed from within, battling against the constraints of her predetermined role. Each pulse of adrenaline reminded her that the truth was a fierce animal, and she must learn to tame it or risk losing everything that lay beyond the horizon of this moment. Then, in a heartbeat, their gazes collided again, and clarity sparked between them like a lightning bolt. The judge began to speak, but the world fell away, leaving only the two of them standing on the precipice of something profound. In that stillness, Alice sensed the shift, the unmasking of her identity, the disrobing of her lies. She could feel the weight of her family's legacy pressing down, yet within her churned a fierce resolve. She would no longer remain a pawn in someone else's game. For amidst the ruin of her past, something new was being forged, an awakening that would alter their fates forever. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge. In the saloon, the soft clinking of glasses and muffled laughter seeped into the air like a heady perfume, masking the tension that crackled beneath the surface. Jasper leaned against the bar, a glass of whiskey cradled in his calloused hands. His eyes scanned the room, landing on a figure at a corner table. The flickering candlelight illuminated Clara's face as she spoke in hushed tones, her expression a mixture of determination and fear, a delicate dance of defiance that only he could decipher. A heavy sigh escaped him, the weight of their shared history pressing down like an anvil on his chest. Memories flooded his mind, the warmth of her laughter, the sharp sting of betrayal. Yet, as he recalled their last encounter, a flicker of something else ignited within him. Clara's fierce spirit had always drawn him in, a wildflower in a barren land. Though the ghosts of their past loomed large, he felt a stirring in his heart, a longing to break free from the chains of regret and doubt. This moment was pivotal, and he could sense it in the air, thick with unsaid truths. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it a promise of change. Jasper took a slow sip, letting the burn of alcohol warm his insides, steadying his resolve. He caught Clara's gaze momentarily, her eyes a storm of emotions that mirrored his own. She looked away, a fleeting shadow of vulnerability crossing her features before she masked it with a fleeting smile. It was a silent agreement, a shared understanding that their fates were intertwined, however precarious. The townsfolk remained oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface, where redemption awaited like a faint glimmering light. As the dusk settled, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation, each breath a calculated risk. Clara stood, adjusting the brim of her hat, shoulders squared with a resolve that sent a jolt through him. She was a warrior, ready to face the demons they had both summoned. Jasper's heart raced, caught between fear of the unknown and the thrill of what lay ahead. Every heartbeat resonated with possibility, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for their next move. He reached for the glass again, feeling the cool glass against his skin, anchoring him in the moment. The plan, whispered like an incantation, began to unfold under the drunken haze of the patrons. There was an unspoken language in the way they positioned themselves, each glance a strategic play, a silent choreography of hope and desperation. Jasper's pulse quickened as Clara approached him, her intent clear in the set of her jaw and the resolve in her eyes. Together, they would confront the shadows of their past, clawing through the dirt to find the treasure of forgiveness buried deep within. The moment was ripe with unfulfilled desires and dreams, and as they ventured into the night, the weight of their choices hung heavy, poised to change everything. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty town square, where wooden storefronts stood like sentinels guarding secrets. Her heart pounded beneath the crisp, white lace of her gown, an uncomfortable shroud that felt more like a prison than a promise. With trembling hands, she adjusted the veil that framed her face, catching a glimpse of her reflection in the window of the saloon. The woman staring back was a stranger, her eyes filled with uncertainty, yet the laughter and chatter around her painted a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. The murmurs of the townsfolk faded into a dull hum as she stood on the cusp of commitment, wrapped in a cocoon of silence. Each footfall of her father echoed like thunder, a reminder of the path laid out before her. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby oak, wrapping around her like a fleeting embrace, urging her to flee. The weight of tradition pressed heavily on her chest, a visceral tug of war between duty and desire. She glanced toward the chapel doors, swollen with anticipation, each creak amplifying the silent scream clawing at her throat. His silhouette emerged from the crowd, tall and unwavering, yet his eyes were a tempest of unspoken words. She locked her gaze onto his, searching for a flicker of understanding, a shared hesitation that would grant her the courage to turn back. Instead, she found a resolve in him that both anchored her and terrified her. The space between them crackled with unarticulated promises, the kind that swirled like dust in the wind, beauty and chaos intertwined, threatening to suffocate or liberate. In that moment, she understood. Love was not always a choice, but sometimes a reckoning. As the ceremony unfolded, she felt the weight of the ring slip over her finger, the cold metal a stark reminder of the warmth she craved, but could not fully accept. The vows echoed in the vaulted space, their solemnity a juxtaposition to the flutter in her chest, a blend of fear and yearning. She caught glimpses of his face, his brow furrowed with determination, yet his lips twitched as if battling the urge to break free from the confines of expectation. The world spun around her, the sacred and the mundane colliding in a disorienting dance, leaving her suspended between two realities. When the final "I do" fell from her lips, the air thickened, tangible with the weight of unfulfilled dreams and latent desires. She glanced at the congregation, their faces blurred by unshed tears and muted smiles, while the sun dipped further, casting a golden hue that felt too bright for her burgeoning doubts. The applause swelled like a wave, yet she stood rooted in place, her heart a wild horse yearning to gallop away from the altar. As they turned to share their first kiss as husband and wife, she closed her eyes, wishing for strength to embrace the unknown, not just the man beside her, but the woman she had yet to become. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty main street, where whispers danced like the wind between weathered clapboard buildings. Each storefront bore the weight of hidden stories. Cracked windows framed by peeling paint told of lives long tied to the land, yet burdened by secrets that felt heavier than the dry earth beneath. Silas stood just outside the saloon, his hat pulled low, eyes scanning the faces of passers-by. A child's laughter echoed faintly, but the warmth of innocence stood in stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air, palpable and suffocating. Martha wiped her hands on her apron, glancing at the townsfolk bustling by. Her heart raced in quiet rebellion against the shroud that cloaked their community. The townspeople exchanged hurried glances, lips pressed tight in unspoken agreements. Each nod carried weight, each sideways glance a silent binding contract to uphold the facade. She tightened her grip on the fabric, feeling the coarse threads dig into her skin, a reminder of the truths she could never voice, the burdens she had to bear alone as the shadows of the past loomed large over her. In the small chapel, whispers mingled with the scent of aged wood and candle wax. Reverend Heiress stood before the congregation, his voice a low murmur that barely penetrated the thick air of denial. Eyes cast down, the townsfolk listened, nodding in rhythm with his pleas for forgiveness, yet the unspoken truths lingered like smoke in the rafters. Each prayer was a futile attempt to cleanse the weight of guilt that smothered their souls, a desperate hope to outrun the shadows clawing at the edges of their consciousness. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated their faces, revealing the cracks in their stoic masks. When dusk settled and the stars emerged, the town transformed into a living tapestry woven with secrets. At Jake's general store, the murmur of hushed conversations broke the silence, mingling with the creaks of the old wooden floor. A family of 4 entered, their eyes darting nervously, as if fearing the walls had ears. Laughter echoed from the back, but it felt hollow, a fragile disguise shrouding the truth that had long since taken root. Jake leaned on the counter, scrutinizing his customers, his expression inscrutable, yet tinged with a knowing ache, recognizing the desperation hidden beneath their forced smiles. As dawn broke, a new day unfurled, but the weight of the night lingered like the mist over the prairie. The townsfolk gathered for the market, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and the muted clamor of barter. Yet beneath that facade, each voice carried an undercurrent of unfulfilled longing, and every handshake felt like sealing a pact to ignore the truths that gnawed at their insides. In the silence between exchanged words, the secrets pulsed, invisible yet potent, capturing hearts in a grip that felt inescapable, a shared burden that would demand reckoning as the sun rose higher, illuminating paths long obscured by darkness. The sun dipped low behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows that danced across the town of Elmsworth. Dust swirled around worn boots as the townsfolk hurried home, their anxious glances darting toward the saloon. A palpable tension hung in the air, Like the heavy silence just before a storm, at the entrance a figure stood framed in the doorway, his silhouette strong yet haunted. The eyes beneath the wide-brimmed hat glinted with determination, an unspoken promise lingering in the silence. Each breath he took resonated with the weight of a past he could not escape, yet one he was prepared to confront. A child's laughter echoed faintly down the street, washed away by the distant growl of thunder. The figure shifted, hand instinctively brushing against the worn leather of an old gun belt. Memories flooded back uninvited. The faces of those he had lost, the blood-soaked ground where hope had been buried. The ache in his chest pulsed, a reminder that the path to redemption was riddled with both love and loss. He clenched his jaw, feeling the rough leather grip beneath his fingers, an anchor in the swirling sea of doubt and guilt that threatened to pull him under. As he moved forward, the townspeople turned, their murmurs weaving a tapestry of fear and skepticism. A woman's eyes widened, despair mingling with recognition, while a man spat on the ground, embodying the town's distrust. Yet in the corners of the street, small acts of resistance sparked to life. An old woman lit a lantern, its glow flickering defiantly in the encroaching darkness. He met her gaze, a silent exchange igniting a flicker of hope. Each step felt like a promise, not just to himself, but to those who had waited for a savior to rise from within the shadows. The dim light of the saloon spilled out like a beacon, its wooden walls soaked in tales of heartache and defiance. Pushing through the door, the scent of whiskey and sweat enveloped him, stirring something deep within. Conversations hushed, eyes widening as he stepped into the room, the air thick with unspoken judgments. He felt the heat of their stares, not as daggers, but as heavy blankets suffocating a flame. Breathing slowly, he held his ground, allowing the past to meld with the present, welcoming the burden of expectation like an old friend returning from war. A soft voice broke through the silence, steady, yet tremulous. "We need you." The words hung in the air, filled with a resonance that echoed through his bones. He searched her face, saw the desperation and fierce hope coiling together. In that moment, he understood the gravity of his decision. The protector would emerge not just from vengeance or survival, but from the belief that even the darkest paths could lead to redemption. And as he stepped forward, shoulders squared, he felt the world shift subtly, a promise ignited in the hearts of those who dared to believe once more. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden hue across the rugged landscape. As he stood at the edge of the old wooden bridge, the creaking planks beneath his boots echoed the turmoil in his chest. Memories of laughter mingled with the bitter taste of loss, each step forward pulling him deeper into the past. He clenched his fists by his sides, feeling the textured wood splinter against his calloused palm. A breath filled with dust and regret escaped his lips, caught in the stillness like a plea for redemption that only the wide expanse of the plains could hear. Across the river, the ghostly silhouette of her figure emerged, framed by wildflowers that danced gently in the afternoon breeze. The way she combed her fingers through the air seemed to draw him in, an invitation laced with unspoken words. Each hesitant step she took made the ground seem to tremble, as if the earth itself held its breath, anticipating their reunion. Her eyes glimmered like shards of glass, reflecting both hope and fear, a fragile balance that mirrored the essence of their shared past. In that moment, silence thrummed between them, weaving a thread of connection that stretched beyond words. The air thickened as he crossed the bridge, a sense of longing and trepidation coursing through him like a frayed wire, ready to snap. Each footfall was heavy with the weight of unsaid apologies and unfulfilled promises. He marveled at the way the sunlight danced off the water, mirroring the flickering hopes he had buried deep within. His heart raced, echoing the rhythmic thud of hooves in the distance, a reminder of the life he had once lived. With every breath, he tasted the bittersweet tang of nostalgia, knowing that the past could either shackle him or set him free. As he drew closer, the distance between them seemed both insurmountable and fragile, like a thread about to break. She turned, her eyes wide, brimming with a mix of fear and exhilaration that left him breathless. The way she held herself spoke volumes, a silent testament to years spent navigating the treacherous terrain of heartache. He imagined the warmth that had once existed between them, a flicker that mirrored the sunlight glinting on the water below. It was a warmth that had been doused by circumstances, yet here they stood, on the precipice of something new, a fragile chance to rebuild what had been lost. Finally, he reached her, the barrier of the bridge dissolving as the sigh of the river flowed beneath. There was an electricity in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared scars and the possibility of healing. Their eyes locked, an unguarded moment where all the hurt and hope coalesced into something tangible. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the light like a solitary star in a vast night sky. He reached out, the distance between their fingers a mere breath, yet laden with the promise of connection that could mend the fractures of their past. Each heartbeat echoed a silent vow. This time they would build something enduring. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Shady Creek. Each wooden board creaked underfoot as Clara stepped outside the saloon, the din of raucous laughter fading behind her. She inhaled deeply, the familiar scent of sage and leather mingling in the air, triggering memories she had buried deep within her. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on the weight of the revolver strapped to her thigh. It was both a comfort and a curse, binding her to choices made in desperation. Across the street, the silhouette of a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and rugged, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. Clara's heart raced as she recognized him, the ghost of her past materializing under the waning light. She clenched her fists at her sides, the softness of her palms betrayed by the hardness of her resolve. Unspoken words hung between them like smoke in the evening air, thick and suffocating. Memories of whispered promises and shared dreams flooded her mind, but the weight of betrayal pressed down heavier than any longing. As he took a hesitant step forward, the dust swirled around his boots, each movement echoing the fractures of their shared history. Regret etched deep lines on his face, a map of lost time and unhealed wounds. Clara's breath quickened, caught between the urge to flee and the pull of a magnet she had thought extinguished. His eyes searched hers, revealing the vulnerability that lurked beneath his hardened exterior, yet she remained guarded, her heart a fortress. The ache of recognition ignited something within her, a flicker of hope amid the despair, but fear kept her anchored to the ground. Underneath the surface of their silence, the weight of unspoken apologies loomed large. He reached out, his hand trembling as if bridging the chasm of years apart. In that moment, Clara felt the raw edges of longing intertwine with the bitterness of abandonment, a wicked dance of love and loss. The space between them crackled with electricity, a subtle reminder that while lives had diverged, the scars of their shared past remained inescapable. She wanted to step forward, but the memories, the laughter, the anger, the betrayal, held her in place, a spectator in her own life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, the shadows lengthened, enveloping them both in a cloak of uncertainty. The world around them faded, leaving only the two of them standing amidst echoes of what once was. Clara's heart thudded loudly in her chest, each beat a reminder of the life she had chosen versus the one she had left behind. With a deep, shuddering breath, she faced him, allowing all the tangled emotions to rise to the surface. In that fragile moment of vulnerability, neither of them knew if they were poised for redemption or another heartbreak, but the air between them was charged with possibility. Dust swirled in the late afternoon sun, casting long shadows that danced across the weathered ground. Clara stood at the edge of the old homestead, the wind whispering secrets through the gnarled branches of the oak tree. Her heart thudded against her ribcage, a relentless drumbeat echoing the uncertainty that loomed before her. Each creak of the porch seemed to call her name, a haunting reminder of the life she once knew. She hesitated, biting her lip as a wave of memories crashed over her, intertwining joy and sorrow in a tangled web. As she stepped onto the porch, the wood groaned beneath her weight, a familiar sound that felt both comforting and oppressive. Clara's hand brushed against the peeling paint, a connection to the past that was both tangible and ethereal. The air was thick with nostalgia, a bitter-sweet perfume that wrapped around her like a shroud. She closed her eyes momentarily, searching for the courage that had always been her armor, yet the truth she sought lay ahead, shrouded in the very fabric of her childhood, a labyrinth of emotion she was determined to navigate. Nearby, the creek gurgled with relentless clarity, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in her mind. She remembered the laughter that once floated on the water's surface, the playful splashes that painted her summers with innocence. Now the water's current felt like an unyielding tide, pulling her deeper into the depths of her past. Clara held her breath, as if the very act of submersion would reveal the hidden fragments of her history. Those pieces that, once combined, would tell a story she desperately needed to understand. Fingers trembling, she reached for the weathered ledger that had lain forgotten on a dusty shelf. The leather cover cracked open, revealing names and dates that sparked recognition. A family tree knotted with faces obscured by time. Each entry resonated within her, pulling memories from the shadows, and the weight of revelation settled on her shoulders. She could almost hear the echoes of long-lost conversations, feelings of betrayal mingling with love, as the truth threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew. Clara swallowed hard, a flicker of determination igniting within her chest. With newfound resolve, she leaned closer, tracing the lines with her fingertip as if to summon the spirits of those who came before. Each name whispered tales of heartache and redemption, layering the air with an electric anticipation. The past wasn't just a collection of memories, it was a living entity eager to be understood. A single tear slipped down her cheek, a token of the release she craved. Clara took a deep breath, knowing she stood on the threshold of something profound, ready to reclaim a legacy long buried beneath the dust of forgotten dreams. Dust swirled in the late afternoon sun, casting long shadows on the wooden porch of the saloon. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of whiskey and unspoken tension. Lila leaned against the bar, her fingers tracing the rim of a glass, the cool surface a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from her chest. A glance from Sam, lingering longer than necessary, sent a ripple through her. Beneath their playful banter lay an undercurrent of unacknowledged fears, a silent acknowledgement that danger brewed not just outside, but within the very heart of their fragile community. The soft creak of the swinging doors interrupted her thoughts as Hank strode in, his presence commanding yet unsettling. The way he tipped his hat to Lila felt rehearsed, like a performance on a stage where the audience held its breath. She caught the shift in his gaze, a fleeting moment of something darker, something predatory that made her skin prickle. Conversations faltered, laughter dried up, and the air thickened with suspicion. Each patron shifted nervously in their seats, the flickering lantern light reflecting their unease as Hank leaned against the bar, an ominous spectre among friends. Sam's fingers clenched around his drink, knuckles whitening as he forced a smile, a mask to conceal the trepidation swirling within. Lila could see the muscles in his jaw twitching, the way he visibly steeled himself against the encroaching threat. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap, filled with the unarticulated fear that Hank's charm could easily turn to malice. Yet the way he played the room, grinning, laughing, hinted at a man who thrived on chaos, sowing seeds of discord that hung heavy and ripe, ready to burst at the slightest provocation. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the saloon's windows like the murmur of restless spirits. In that moment, it wasn't just the storm gathering on the horizon that worried Lila, it was the storm brewing in the hearts of those she thought she knew. She exchanged a knowing look with Sam, a silent communication laden with unvoiced fears. Their shared understanding ignited a flame of determination within her. To confront Hank, to stand against whatever darkness seeped into their lives, they would need to trust each other more than ever, to harness their own strength amidst the brewing turmoil. As the evening wore on, laughter returned, though it felt strained, like a fragile truce. Lila noticed the way Sam kept one eye on Hank, the tension coiling tighter around their little circle. Her heart raced with each clink of glass, each forced jest. The threat loomed large, a shadow that refused to dissipate. Yet something deep within her stirred, a resolve to protect what they had built together. The warmth of camaraderie flickered like a candle in the wind, but she knew that sometimes the fiercest battles come from the most unexpected foes, and the greatest redemption lay in the courage to stand firm, no matter the cost. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the valley in hues of burnt orange and deep purple, he stood at the edge of the cliff, heart pounding like a war drum. The bitter wind whispered through the canyons, carrying with it echoes of guilt and unfulfilled promises. Every breath felt weighted, as if the very air conspired against him. He clenched his fists, digging his nails into his palms, the pain a small distraction from the tempest within. It was here, where earth met sky, that he hoped for clarity, a revelation to soothe his restless spirit. The distant sound of hooves broke the silence, each rhythmic thud a reminder of the life he left behind. As the figure approached, silhouetted against the fading light, memories surged like a flood. Her laughter once rang through these canyons, a bright melody in the harshness of his world. He turned, unable to meet her gaze, afraid that the slightest glance would unravel the tenuous grip he had on his resolve. The warmth of her presence seeped into the cold crevices of his heart, igniting forgotten feelings and buried regrets. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, unseen in the growing dusk. With every step she took, the ground seemed to shift beneath him. They stood on the precipice of their past, the weight of years stretching taut between them. He could sense her disappointment seeping into the air, thick and palpable, like a storm brewing on the horizon. She reached out, fingers trembling, poised to bridge the chasm of silence. Their eyes locked, the unsaid words swirling in the space between, a lifetime of hurt, longing, and the flickering chance of forgiveness. The world around them faded, leaving only the raw, pulsating energy of possibility. Time hung suspended as he wrestled with the truth that lay buried deep within. The revelation clawed at him, demanding to be set free. He could feel the walls he'd built crumbling piece by piece, with each heartbeat resonating like a drum roll in the stillness. All at once, the ache of his choices surged forward, raw and unrelenting. He was an unwilling actor in his own life story, haunted by shadows of missed chances. His heart raced, an urgent drumbeat calling him to confront the ghosts that loomed over them both, to reveal what had remained cloaked in silence for far too long. Then, with a breath that felt like a leap of faith, the truth erupted from his lips. Words tumbled forth, jagged yet liberating, painting a tapestry of his deepest fears and desires. As she listened, the pain etched across her features softened, a glimmer of understanding flickering in her eyes. The canyon echoed their shared silence, each confession carving a path toward redemption. In that moment, beneath the vast expanse of the twilight sky, they found themselves standing on the edge of a new beginning. The past, while still a heavy burden, now felt like a map leading them home. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue over the dusty town of Silver Creek. Its fading light danced across the weathered wooden beams of the saloon, where the air was thick with tension. A man stood outside, his silhouette sharp against the dusky sky. Sweat dripped down his brow as he gripped the handle of his revolver, the metallic tang mingling with the scent of gunpowder lingering in his mind. Each heartbeat echoed a steady rhythm of dread. He inhaled deeply, trying to fill his lungs with courage, but the weight in his chest grew heavier, threatening to crush him under its burden. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken words, eyes darting nervously between the card players and the barkeep, who wiped the counter with a ragged cloth. A figure sat at a corner table, face partially obscured by shadows, an ever-present grin that barely reached his cold eyes. The man outside could feel the pull of that grin, a magnet to his deepest fears and regrets. Memories resurfaced, unwanted flashes of laughter now intertwined with pain. Each recollection burned like fire, igniting the need for confrontation that simmered beneath his skin, a yearning for resolution that felt both essential and terrifying. The first step across the threshold felt impossibly heavy, as though the weight of 1,000 grievances held him back. Yet driven by a longing for closure, he pushed through the saloon doors, the creaking wood announcing his arrival like a tolling bell. Heads turned, conversations stuttered to a halt, and the air pulsed with a sudden, electric anticipation. He met the gaze of the man in the shadows, an entire history igniting between them. The silence stretched, a canvas painted with unsaid truths, each inch forward, a step closer to the reckoning that awaited them both. Words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as he crossed the distance in agonizing slowness. Each footfall felt like an echo of his past mistakes, each heartbeat a reminder of the man he once was. The other man's grin widened, a chilling invitation that sent shivers down his spine. Their eyes locked, and the heat of unresolved conflict seemed to radiate between them. In that moment, time slowed, the surrounding world fading away, leaving only the bitter taste of vengeance and the desperate need for redemption. He raised his chin, a silent challenge hanging in the air, a plea for understanding clashing against the urge for reprisal. Finally, the moment arrived, a culmination of destiny and choice as the two men faced one another. A depth of feeling surged through him, a potent mix of rage and sorrow, but beneath it lay a flicker of hope. Could this be the beginning of something new, a chance to break free from the chains of their shared past? As he reached for his revolver, fingers trembling, uncertainty gripped him. Yet within that uncertainty was the promise of transformation, the possibility of healing. With a steadying breath, he understood that this confrontation was not merely about vengeance. It was the first step toward the freedom he had long yearned for. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow that wrapped around Sarah like a warm embrace. She stood at the edge of the ranch, her heart racing as she watched the dusty road stretch into the distance. The weight of the decision loomed heavy in her chest, a storm brewing between her ribs. Memories of laughter and warmth flickered like candle flames in her mind, drowning in shadows of betrayal. She took a deep breath, feeling the sweet, earthy scent of the land mingle with the bitterness of regret, hoping clarity would rise from the murky depths of her soul. Across the yard, Jake leaned against the fence, hands stuffed deep in his pockets, eyes fixed on the horizon. His rugged features betrayed nothing, yet the clenching of his jaw revealed the turmoil within. He knew the choice she faced, and a sense of helplessness clawed at him. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, the silence stretching taut between them like a drawn bowstring. The air thickened with unspoken words, their shared history hanging heavy, as if the land itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable decision to shatter the stillness. As twilight enveloped the ranch, a chorus of crickets began their evening symphony. Sarah's fingers grazed the rough wood of the fence, seeking comfort in its solidity. Her mind raced with visions of what could be, a life untouched by pain, a fresh start far from the scars of yesterday. But the tether of loyalty tugged at her heart, whispering of promises made and the man who once held her close. The weight of the past was a chain, and she could feel its sting as she contemplated severing it, each thought like a tremor beneath her skin. Jake stole a glance at her, his heart pounding in rhythm with the unyielding tension that surrounded them. He had fought his demons, clawing his way back to the light, but now he faced a different battle. The thought of her leaving felt like a gunshot in the silence, a wound that ran deep. He longed to call out, to bridge the chasm of uncertainty, but the words stuck like a dry lump in his throat. Instead, he straightened, a subtle shift, a silent plea for her to see the man he had become, not the broken figure of his past. As darkness settled, the stars began to twinkle above, distant yet brilliant, illuminating the path ahead. Sarah's resolve solidified like the earth beneath her feet. With one last glance at Jake, she felt a bittersweet ache in the pit of her stomach. The choice was not merely about leaving or staying, it was about reclaiming her own narrative. In that moment, she turned towards the future, her heart a mix of hope and sorrow, as she took the first step into the unknown, determined to carve a new destiny from the ashes of the old. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Sarah stood on the porch of the weathered cabin, a place that had come to symbolize not just refuge, but a newfound family. The weight of her past, once an anchor pulling her into despair, had transformed into a tapestry of lessons learned and bonds forged. No longer was she merely the fake wife meant to deceive. She had become the embodiment of resilience, love, and forgiveness. With each laugh shared, every story told around the flickering fire, Sarah had found more than just acceptance. She had unearthed the power of connection, an unbreakable thread that stitched together their diverse backgrounds into a vibrant quilt of kinship. Together, they had created a world where trust flourished and shadows of betrayal faded into memory. As twilight enveloped the land, she felt a surge of gratitude for every hardship that had led her here. Life had a way of orchestrating the most unexpected symphonies, turning heartbreak into harmony. In that serene moment, Sarah understood. True wealth isn't measured in silver or gold, but in the love we cultivate and the families we choose to build.